Welcome back, friends, old and new alike. I'm Sci Fi Cat, your redoubtable furry host to all things fantasy, science fiction, and everything in between. Yes, I mean furry as in fuzzy. No, I don't mean it as a date night scenario, and no amount of catnip will change my mind. As you may have determined by my distinctive desert garb, today I will be evaluating parts 1 and 2 of Denis Villeneuve's Dune. His adaptation is the most recent of many attempts to bring Frank Herbert's seminal science fiction novel to screen. The challenge I have set for myself in this review is not to compare Dune Part 1 and Part 2 to the source material. That's right. I've closed the book and rested my reading glasses and will only be evaluating the films strictly on their merits or deficits as works of cinema alone. To aid me in my goal, I had Thumbs outfit me with a shock collar that's triggered by mentions of the, B-O-O-K. Whew, dear Bast, I'm already chafing under the restraint. All right, let's roll camera. In part 1, Villeneuve constructs the Duneverse for the audience. Kind of. He introduces the major characters, not least Paul Atreides, our brooding principal player, Mother Jessica, Father Duke Leto, and the family Atreides nemesis, the Harkonnens. Namely, Baron Vladimir, outfitted in a formidable onesie. We are also familiarized with the planet Arrakis, the eponymous Dune, arguably a character of its own, from whence flows the spice, a hallucinogenic substance necessary for all space travel and thus space commerce. In my opinion, my condensed summary given above, trying to summarize his summary, provides a more thorough background than what Villeneuve supplies on screen. I understand not wanting to expository dump audiences, but his background is so murky it's hard to make the vital connections between the various moving parts which drive the plot. Additionally, several key elements, some not even in English, Villeneuve throws randomly into dialogue, which ultimately play huge roles in that which shall not be named, that Villeneuve never explains, such as, what's the importance of a great house? How are they related to the Emperor? Why does spice enable space travel? Who or what are the Bene Gesserit? What are mentats? Oh wait, they didn't even get a mention in the movie. Not to be forgotten, audiences are also acquainted to the Fremen, the indigenous people of Dune who are victims of the neo-colonial forces on Arrakis mining spice. Hey, I was only thinking about the book that time. The Fremen are depicted as resistance fighters trying to disable the Harkonnens until when they unexpectedly leave, Shani forebodingly pondering,
And who will our next oppressors be?
"Blech. I'll take that one for the team." The next shortcoming of this film was characterization. I've met scratching posts with better personality than this cast. Almost every actor fluctuated between only two states of emotion. Duke Leto was either pretending to be stalwart.
What do they say about this hellhole again?
To shower, you scrub your ass with sand, my lord. That's what they say.
That's what they say.
Or showed utter defeat.
If anything happens, will you protect our son?
Leto, this is not you.
I thought we'd have more time.
You'd think the Baron already had him naked and paralyzed on the slab while he was still in power on Caladan. And Jessica, geez, does this woman ever stop crying? She has about 2 scenes of composure, and the rest she is trembling and sobbing her eyes out. She invokes the famous mantra against fear, beginning with, "Fear is the mind killer."
I must not fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. It's the little death that brings obliteration.
It would have been nice to see it be effective. Then there's Paul, Mr. Sulk and Super Sulk. Seriously, is this guy ever happy or pensive or angry? Even when he goes off at Jessica for making him a freak, it's more a whine than rage.
You did this to me! You Bene Gesserit made me a freak!
I admit, the outburst made me giggle from awkwardness. The tone was so off. I'll come back to Super Sulker in part 2, worry not. The character who suffered most from the thin characterization was Dr. Yua, the betrayer of the Atreides. Villeneuve barely allows enough screen time for Yua to be identified, let alone establish the intimacy and trust the Doctor has with the Atreides inner circle. As a result, audiences have no time to process the deep betrayal of Yua's treason.
The traitor.
His actions merely register as another domino in the cascade of the Atreides' downfall orchestrated by the Harkonnens.
Don't be too sure it's an act of love.
What does he mean?
When it's a gift, not a gift.
In the film, Yua doesn't help his case either by delivering his defense for turning over the Duke in an exchange for his wife Wana in flat, unaffected speech.
I'm sorry, my lord. But I've made a bargain with the Baron.
Why?
I had no choice. The Harkonnens have my wife, Wana. They take her apart like a doll. I will buy her freedom, and you are the price.
In the book, Ewan knew he was in a complex, no-win situation regarding the Baron, himself, and his Bene Gesserit wife, but by hiding the poison tooth in the Duke, he could avenge them all in one stroke. I'm sorry, I had to get that out there. It was a gross disservice to the character. The 2 characters I did enjoy were Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa, and Stilgar by Javier Bardem. Both actors truly became their characters. I felt like, yes, this is the Duncan and Stilgar from the book. I barely felt that voltage, Thumbs. And you know why? They emoted. Duncan smiled. He joked.
Hey, you. Put on some muscle?
I did?
No.
He reminisced about being with the Fremen and expressed admiration for their way of life. Stilgar, during his meeting with Duke Leto, resolutely followed his customs and showed his ways of respect that were totally at odds with the Duke's. When encountering Paul and Jessica, he showed another novel emotion, skepticism. That is until his fight with Jessica, when he shifted his attitude and made peace, apologized, and showed new respect to the weirding woman.
Why didn't you say you were a weirding woman and a fighter?
Conversation ran short.
Peace, woman. Peace. I judged hastily.
In short, these 2 characters were dynamic. Everyone else was as flat as a piece of plywood. In the climax of the movie, Paul must face off against a seasoned Fremen fighter named Jameis, who seems to have a bone to pick with Paul for no other reason at all other than he is an outsider. Paul beats him deftly, and this smooths his and his mother's acceptance into Stilgar's tribe. But before I assess the overall viability of this movie, a hole the size of a sandworm's gaping maw needs to be discussed. That thing looks like a buttworm! I get my shit checked for those things every year! The Kwisatz Haderach.
Told to bear only daughters, but you in your pride thought you could produce the Kwisatz Haderach.
In the film, the Bene Gesserit, who the audience are left to assume function as an eminence grise to the Emperor, hint that Paul may be this Kwisatz Haderach. Jessica explains to Paul that the Bene Gesserit sect have been breeding and crossing bloodlines of the great houses, among others, in order to bring forth this super being. And what is the Kwisatz Haderach supposed to do?
A mind. Powerful enough to bridge space and time. Past and future. Who can help us into a better future.
What the fuck? Question 1. What does bridge time and space even mean? What does it accomplish? Once you break it down, this statement is only nonsense dressed up to sound profound. Question 2. What does a better future look like for the Duneverse? And that's it. That's all the explanation we are given throughout the two films. And I'm grinding my teeth in protest to the gross inaccuracy compared with the book. You're getting a little trigger happy there, Thumbs. Okay, after all that griping, does Dune Part 1 work as a movie? Grudgingly, I say yes, but it's by the skin of its teeth or film or worm skin or whatever. The elements that makes it work as a movie are twofold. The cheapest element is spectacle. There was admittedly something special seeing all the technology from the book come to life, like the body shields, ornithopters, and the planetary bombing. And the addition of the throat singing for the Sardaukar gave them an inhuman unworldliness that added to the original concept of the character. The second, more significant aspect was the thin excuse for a plot. There was so much opportunity to enrich the simple betrayal, escape, survive, fight, accepted by the locals line they went for. Still, they managed enough conflict to build up sufficient tension to keep audiences engaged. All right, everyone take a quick litter box break and snag some Friskies party mix because I'm forging on to part 2 of Villeneuve's Dune. Oh, shut up already! Picking up where we left off, remember how I concluded that Dune Part 1 sorta worked as a movie because it had some measure of conflict? Well, forget all that for this installment. Part 2, on the other paw, barely possesses any conflict at all. Rather, the story does the opposite and extinguishes valid sources of tension. For example, by Dune Part 2, the Fremen, Stilgar included,
We must pray.
believe Paul is the Lisan al-Gaib, a messiah-like figure, i.e. the Kwisatz Haderach, who will restore Dune to its lush days of greenery. What a great opportunity for Paul's character development. Should he use the Fremen in his capacity as the Lisan al-Gaib to win back his ducal seat from the Harkonnens? More significantly still, with his vision and the Bene Gesserit's talk of Kwisatz Haderach, could he be this Messiah? But no. At perhaps what should be the turning point in the film, when Jessica drinks the water of life to become a Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother. Do we know who they are yet? Do we? I didn't think so. Paul basically dismisses the Fremen's belief in him as a messiah, explaining his mother's weird cult planted their beliefs as propaganda, and her transformation into a Reverend Mother is basically a scam.
It's no miracle.
My mother was trained to do that. Poison transmutation is something advanced Bene Gesserit can do.
This is all wrong. Paul's reasoning behind eviscerating their religion is that a Fremen should lead the Fremen and that he just wants to be trained like them, to be one of the crowd. Aw, so touching. He just wants to fit in like any teenage boy born to extraordinary and terrible purpose. Ouch! Frankly, after Paul's little speech, my feelings were all confused, which is not a good sign. Part 1 spent a lot of screen time building the mystery and power behind the throne of Jessica's order. And now Paul is saying it's baloney. Part 1 had strange voices echoing when Paul was exposed to the spice hallucinogen, calling for the Kwisatz Haderach in him to rise. Now, in part 2, he just rejects the role without inner turmoil or doubt or outside influences like Stilgar or Jessica trying to convince him otherwise. Just, no, I'm going to be a Freeman in the desert. Overlooking the poor execution, such a momentous decision in a story, film, book, or otherwise, should have consequences which build up tension for the climax, hurdles, and conflicts that cause the main character to reconsider or double down on their original choice. Not Paul. As a matter of fact, everything seems to be going right for Paul. He becomes accepted among the Fremen, is included in their elite warrior troops, the Fedaykin, and joins them in conducting raids on Harkonnen spice operations, using abysmal guerrilla tactics. That was an unplanned source of humor.
What the hell are you doing? Give it!
Pocket sand.
Next, he rode the grandfather of all sandworms on his first flipping try. He even gets the girl. Speaking of Chani, there is so much I could say about Chani, but I'm playing by the rules I set for myself, so I'm sticking to the film. The quote-unquote relationship between Paul and Chani provided another excellent opportunity for conflict in part 2. The lovebirds could easily have disputed about his role in the prophecies, the tension building over the course of the film, one side arguing he must take on the responsibility, while the other countering that the horrible dreams of holy war will come to pass, and so on. Instead, Chani basically drops the ultimatum that if Paul uses the prophecy of Lisan al-Gaib to assume leadership of the Fremen, she's gone. Paul responds with, "It's okay, baby, I'll never change. I'm no messiah. I don't want to lead the Fremen. Fremen should lead the Fremen." No friction whatsoever. I gotta hand it to Chani, though. As soon as he became emperor, she was true to her word and peaced out. But before we get to that, The secular Fremen from the north have to move south by the religious fanatic Fremen as their siege has been destroyed by Harkonnens, a place where Paul has been avoiding the whole film.
She says you should be coming with us.
You know I can't.
She's asking why.
Because I must continue fighting in the north to protect you down there in the south.
In the most lukewarm change of heart in movie history, Paul tells Chani he is resolute about not going south. Chani states, not pleads or begs or persuades, simply points out that they, the Fremen from Siege Tabor, will not go south if he doesn't go. Paul.
If I go south, I might lose you.
You will never lose me. Paul Atreides.
I'll cross the storm with you. Go south.
What? Does this guy have no resolve at all? Is he that pussy-whipped? I can say that I'm a cat. It took him 2 seconds to change his mind about something that he has been resisting the whole film. No hesitation, no pause for interwrangling of pros and cons, nothing. Shake my head. Finally reaching the south, Jessica has been rabble-rousing for Paul to be the Lisan al-Gaib. Since drinking the water of life, she doesn't cry anymore, but she has turned into a single-minded freak bent on starting a holy war. Now in the south, reluctantly, let's face it, everything Paul does is reluctantly, he drinks the water of life to open his mind and fully become the Kwisatz Haderach. Let's pause here and take a moment to talk about Paul's visions. In the film, the Kwisatz Haderach was a being that could bridge space and time according to the Bene Gesserit. The book described this phenomenon in more detail and greater subtlety. Ouch, let me finish! But we're sticking to the film definition. To communicate this gift, the director used dreams or visions Paul would experience. The Reverend Mother asked Paul if he dreamed things that came to pass. He said he did. Then not one of his visions occurred on screen. And I don't count Duncan dying because it's difficult to tell from the vision if it's the same place. And let's be honest, the only reason Zen Chani was in so many of his wet dreams in part 1 were to justify her paycheck and the hype her name brought to the production. She apparently is leading him to some holy war in these visions, but the audience wouldn't know that without Paul explaining so, because the dreams are mostly just Zen Chani silhouetted in a sheer dress blowing in the wind with a bloody knife. Then, in part 2, Paul kind of shifts gears. He's no longer following Chani, he's now following Jessica? A naked Jessica.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Again, in premonition to a holy war, which apparently his mother is now leading him to instead of Chani. Perhaps the most disappointing among many, many disappointments is after Paul drinks the water of life, the substance that will open his mind across space and time, the vision sequences stop. When it's their time to shine, they disappear altogether. Paul describes them briefly, but the opportunity for some truly trippy visuals is wasted. Moving on to the strangest of Paul's visions, Jameis. That's right, the same Jameis from part 1. The ethereal Sandspice voices said to listen to the friend, and that friend was an imagined Jameis who offered sage advice about the desert.
Process that cannot be understood by stopping it. We must move with the flow of the process.
And so on. Is this the face of a friend? As mentioned before, when they met in the flesh, Jameis was nothing but provocative towards Paul and Jessica, subsequently challenging him to a fight to the death, and then died by Paul's hand. But he returns in part 2, again as some benevolent spirit of the desert. Paul, looking for guidance, even mistakes Chani's moonlit desert silhouette for Jameis's. Not sure what that says. I am truly baffled at what message Villeneuve and the writers are trying to communicate here. See the friend in the enemy? See the life giver under the life taker of the desert? It's so oblique it could mean anything and therefore nothing. And it has no grounding in the book. All right, back to the narrative. What about the big baddie, you ask? Surely Villeneuve couldn't screw up something so fundamental. O ye of little faith. Other than the Baron and Beast Raban, the center stage villain is the Baron's nephew, Fade Rotha. He features in the final duel with Paul, fighting as the Emperor's champion.
You killed my father. Prepare to die.
I honestly contemplated using the litter box during the fight. While there was some snazzy sword fighting, I had no emotional investment in the outcome. I knew Paul was going to win because the filmmakers had put so little effort into building up Fade Rotha as a villain. We are introduced to him taking part in a gladiatorial-style fight that is mostly staged. 2 of his 3 opponents are drugged. The final undrugged fighter is to show the Baron what kind of man he is. Fade lowers his shield in a show of bravado, but dispatches the man rather handily anyway. Everything else about him, the stuff that should be chilling viewers to the bone, is told to us by a third party. Lady Fenring relates in an incongruently sprightly voice that he enjoys pain and is more than a little sexually bonkers. We don't really see Fade Rotha do much else but sucker punch Beast Raban, which, he deserved. There's no build-up as to why the audience should find this character menacing and a threat to Paul. So if he's not perceived as a risk, why should the audience assume anything other than that the protagonist conquers over him? 0 suspense, 0 engagement, failed storytelling. So let's review. Paul has no conflict regarding becoming the Kwisatz Haderach. He refuses, then accepts with no wrangling in between. He has no trouble becoming a Fremen. He doesn't stop his mom from going south to proselytize.
Not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
He has no conflict with Chani. They are essentially on the same page until the very end when she just leaves. The duel in the end has no tension because the adversary has no diabolical background. There is absolutely no source of conflict, no source of suspense to draw the viewer in, which to me makes this a failed film in so many ways.
A few minutes later.
Much better. Now, where was I? No, 1, 2, 2. Oh, yes! Okay, I can't take it anymore. I have to say something about the book. It's an injustice otherwise. Okay. The themes. Oh, my bass, the themes are all ass backwards from minute 1. Chani's opening monologue, which represents the Harkonnens and whoever replaces them as colonial oppressors, and Fremen as indigenous people being hunted to extinction, is a blatant misrepresentation of Frank Herbert's portrayal. In the book, Did the Fremen want the outsiders gone? Sure, but it had nothing to do with neocolonialism or Arrakis for Fremen nationalism. It had everything to do with the delicate balance of the ecosystem of the spice and sustaining the sandworms, their sacred Shai Hulud. That's why the Judge of the Change was an ecologist. Second, Fremen were tribal, but not divided by region and religion. There was not this skeptic agenda as embodied by Chani and her big-mouthed associate from the north who considered their southern counterparts enslaved to superstition and propaganda. Another huge theme that Villeneuve didn't touch on at all was the power of love. And I don't mean in some corny love ballad way. In the Duneverse, there are several branches of highly disciplined orders. Mentats, Bene Gesserit, Suk medical doctors, all with certain strictures they are mentally trained to not disobey. Herbert, however, made a point of showing there is one thing that can trump these constraints: love. It caused Dr. Yua, an Imperial Suk physician, indoctrinated to do no harm, to deliberately injure the family in his care, all for the love of his captive and very likely tortured Bene Gesserit wife Wana. Jessica defied her stringent orders' command to only have daughters because of her love of her duke, possibly disrupting centuries of bloodline management. This theme is virtually absent from both Part 1 and 2. A major theme included in the book but never explained in the film are why the Duneverse uses Mentats, Bene Gesserit, and space guilds. There was a war called the Butlerian Jihad that destroyed all artificial intelligence, which had more or less enslaved humans, and now the use of such thinking machines are forbidden. Therefore, they have super thinking humans. For example, in the film, the actors you see roll their eyes in the back of their head, yeah, those are mentats, basically superhuman calculators. Would have been nice for Villeneuve to explain that. It was also disappointing to never see a Space Guild pilot. Per the book, they are so saturated by spice they are mutated and no longer look human. The theme of the responsible use of power, its influence, and the burden one bears when having such power is a prominent theme as well. So is loyalty, and Herbert also probes, without disparaging, the elements of faith. In the film, love is cliched, especially between Chani and Paul. Religion is portrayed as the opiate of the masses or a means of manipulation. Loyalty is shown only in a militaristic sense, except perhaps among the Fremen. And again, the neo-colonial oppression stuff is utter rubbish. In reality, folks, I don't know if Dune can be satisfactorily brought to screen in the current Hollywood climate. Directors and writers will be tempted, maybe even strong-armed, to mold the narrative to reflect modern trends and concerns. Or worse, they will want to impose their own agenda on the story, which is silly. Dune is timeless. It doesn't need modern gloss to make it applicable to today's audience. It's a story of imperial planetary feudalism with a fictional mystery substance that permits space travel. There is a monopoly on this spice that everyone is vying for because it makes them rich. There's a chosen one who doesn't want to be a chosen one. There are powers behind the throne, centuries of revenge between families. Boiling down the story is not so complicated. Hell, if they can make Game of Thrones digestible to audiences, surely they can get this right. Ultimately, directors and writers need to give viewers more credit. Still, I hold out hope that a new wave of directors and writers will acknowledge filmgoers' IQ, but then again, I'm an optimist. Not sure how, but I am. What do you viewers think? Do audiences have the brain capacity to comprehend a film storyline with the complexity of a true adaptation of Dune? Or has the intellect of the movie-going hoi polloi mushified so much in recent years that anything more complicated than Baby Shark is beyond their understanding. Thumbs, if you play that song, I swear to Bast. Please discuss these observations in the comments, whether good, thoughtful movie making is a lost cause, or if there is any hope for the future. And while you're there, hammer down the subscribe button if you like what I'm meowing about, and ding the ding dong to receive updates about new videos. Now, Sci Fi Cat may have snorted a bit too much spice trying to get this video out in time. Suddenly, I'm no longer chasing my tail. I am one with my tail. The future. The future is so clear. I see that the next Star Trek creation from the Kurtzman Brain Trust will be a disaster. No one needs to bridge time and space to see that coming. Except for Picard Season 3. That was fucking great. But that was because he kept his fingers out of the cookie jar. Anyway, Kurtzman equals rubbish Trek. Thank you and good night. Don't do drugs.